back, Teaching Entrepreneurship lovers. I'm your host, Federico. Making things real in class is one of the main challenges for entrepreneurship educators. And in this episode, you will get an inspirational exercise to run in your entrepreneurship class about how to make things as real as possible by going outside, on the road with your students. So, really exciting. And this exercise can be found and downloaded for free to copy or to improve on from TeachingEntrepreneurship.org, and it's going to be shared by a good friend of mine, Doan Winkel. Doan is co-chair in entrepreneurship and director of Malton Center for Entrepreneurship at John Carroll University. He is also senior vice president of programming of USASB, that stands for United States Association for Small Businesses and Entrepreneurship. He is also co-founder at Legacy Out Loud, Entrepreneurship Education Project, and TeachingEntrepreneurship.org, where we are sharing the best practices and techniques for teaching entrepreneurship. We are also sharing exclusive resources, tools, exercises, and much more. So if you don't want to miss them, I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter at TeachingEntrepreneurship.org. So, Doan, from host to guest, right? Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome.
Yeah. I'm super excited because today we talk about the importance of making the entrepreneurial lessons real. But first of all, I'm excited because you are going to share with us the method that you use to support. So the majority of our audience already knows you, but for a couple of those who don't, give us a kind of overview about what led you to become an entrepreneurship professor first.
Sure, super quick. So I grew up, my father was a math educator and was very different in how he taught and his approach to education. So I kind of grew up in a household where I thought, education should be very contextual and you should be able to learn by doing, and you should be able to understand the content of what you're learning, within the context of who you are and what's going on around you. And so I never got that in my education. And so I always wanted to change that and create different experiences for students and more impactful experiences for students. And then I've always just kind of been that entrepreneurial guy. And so those two things kind of came together and said, well, it's a perfect, venue for teaching in this way and for teaching something I'm super passionate about. And so I just kind of naturally, found my way there over time.
Can you also now give us a kind of quick highlight why keeping it real lesson in the course, the entrepreneurship course, is so important in the entrepreneurial process, and what's the goal also of your exercise?
Yeah, so this particular exercise, I do this on the very first day. So this is the student's very first experience to my course. And what I'm trying to do is a couple different things. So one is to sort of set the tone of the course and give them the idea that this is not going to be normal. This is not going to be your average course. This is going to be very real. It's going to be a little scary. So hopefully I kind of get them way out of their comfort zone. I don't want to just take them a little bit out of their comfort zone. I want to get them way out of the comfort zone. And so I set that tone from the very first moment. And I make it very ambiguous and just try to give them an opportunity to engage in an experience and then to come back to the classroom and debrief the experience to say, this is what the semester is going to feel like. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is I want to get them excited, but two, just from a practical standpoint, if students are really, really, really uncomfortable with that, then I want them to leave right away so they can go find a different class before those other classes fill up, right? So I'm also kind of saying, this is what it's going to feel like. If you really don't like this, you probably shouldn't be in this class, and so you should go find a different class to be in it. But I want you to figure that out on day one rather than 2 weeks into the class.
So like a natural selection.
Yeah, I think that's only fair, right? I don't think it's right to take a week or something to kind of slowly get the students engaged, and then a week or two later, they start to figure out what the class is all about and they don't like it. And then it's just a logistical nightmare. And so I just think it's fair on that level to do this as well from day one.
Makes sense. And now thinking from the student perspective, right? What critical entrepreneurial skills your students will learn from this experience
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I mean, one big one is action, right? Small iterative action, and being able to work within a team to decide, what steps are we going to take and what are we going to do right now, and just being able to not plan but do. Another one is the notion of sort of observing your surroundings, seeing what's going on around you, and trying to very quickly figure out, how can I understand my surroundings to think about how can I add value. Potentially interviewing customers, sort of doing a self-assessment kind of thing, in terms of what is it that I have that I can offer to somebody else to create value. And then some sense of financial management. And as we get into it, I'll explain that part a little more. It's not a critical piece, but thinking about the resources you have available, where those resources came from, and the best way to utilize the financial resources, and be a good steward. Because in this exercise, they're not the students' financial resources, they're mine. And so the students, I want them to think about, when you're not playing with your own money, how does that change things?
Yeah. Now, according to you, Doan, is there something that other teachers that want to adopt or use this exercise should prepare before the lesson? I don't know, any material or something that you would like to recommend, or something that you think is going to be useful?
Yeah, the only thing I really recommend is the location, right? And so the location is kind of critical, in terms of it needs to be a place where there's a little bit of commerce going on. So if there's a strip mall, or if there's a street with lots of shops, little shops on it, so there should be some commerce there, and there should be good foot traffic, right? So people wandering around. It could be in a mall, right? If there's a mall, that kind of a thing. And ideally it's close by campus. A lot of times, within a block or two of campus, there'll be this street with little shops or something on it. But if it can't be that close to campus, then, you might have to tweak this exercise to actually meet and debrief them on location. You have to be a little creative with how to do this, but ideally, if you can find a place that's not far off campus that has that commerce aspect and the foot traffic, that's the ideal thing. But other than that, there's really no prep work that needs to be done, because it's more of just pushing them into the experience and then debriefing the experience afterward.
Okay. Can you walk us a little bit through how you execute this exercise? So I would say a step-by-step guide or something like that, so we can have a better understanding of how things goes. Sure.
So the first thing I do is, before class starts, I send the students a couple emails or announcements, on the class page, reminding them and telling them that instead of meeting in the classroom on the first day of class, we're going to meet at this location, right? And I give them a picture of the location. I tell them exactly where it is. If it's an address, I give them a MapQuest, every possible way I can think of to make sure they understand that we're meeting in this specific location. I let them know that, and I let them know, don't be late, because we're going to meet in this place. And, if class starts at 10 o'clock, then the exercise starts at 10, not 10:01. So be on time.
Announcement is done in class, it's done by email. Do they ask questions?
It's done through email, or, and I post an announcement on the class website. But I don't, this is the first day of class. So this is their very first class period, and I don't meet them in the class first. I meet them on location.
So it's like entirely a surprise. So
Correct.
They don't know what to expect.
Nope. I just tell them we're meeting here the very first day of class. So just show up here, and that's it. And I remind them a couple times, I send out a couple emails, I post a couple things on the class page just to make sure everybody sees it. And I tell them all, please remind your friends in class, like, this is different. I also end up writing in the classroom. I go and I write a message on the board, something along the lines of, you should have met at this location. please hang out and we'll be back soon, right? Because if the students go to the classroom, by the time they get to the location, it's going to be too late. And so I kind of let them know, you missed the opportunity, but hang out and we'll be there soon.
Okay.
So I make that, I send a couple emails. I send a couple early, right? When students sign up. And then I send a couple more at the very last minute for students who've signed up, late at the very last minute, just to make sure I kind of capture everybody. But that's it. So then, I am at the location. And then as students show up, I separate them into groups of 4. So the first 4 students that show up, they're in a group. Second 4 that show up, they're in a group. And once the 4 students are in a group, I give them 10 $1 bills. And I don't tell them anything about what it is, right? I say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're a group, here's your $10. Or, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're a group, here's your $10. And then I do that for all the students that show up. And so everybody is in a group, everybody has their $10, and I give it a little, a few extra minutes for the stragglers, or if they're coming from a different class, and they're late or whatever. So I'll give them maybe 5 minutes extra to show up. And so then everybody's in a group of 4 is ideal, I found. And everybody has 10 $1 bills. And then I tell them, I go, so the goal of this exercise is for your group to make as much money as possible in 30 minutes. And I say something to them, based on the location, right? I tell them there's stores around here, there's a CVS pharmacy, or there's a, whatever. I point out a couple random things. There's people wandering around. There's all kinds of ways to create value for those people. You have 30 minutes. We'll meet back at the classroom at, whatever time, about 35 minutes later is, and we'll talk about what you learned. And I don't answer any questions. I don't give them any more information. I also tell them legally, I should say, right? I say, you have to, whoever can make the most money legally. But then I tell them, I don't answer any questions they have. I don't give them any more instructions than that. I keep it very, very ambiguous. And I tell them, whichever team makes the most money gets to keep all of the money.
Yeah. Do they have to take picture or evidence of how they're making money, or how it goes there at that part?
Yeah, so I've tried this a few different ways. Sometimes I've asked them to gather that or to keep some sort of evidence or something. Other times I haven't. And I don't really know what the best way to do that is. I mean, there's been sort of plus and minus of both ways. Sometimes they've taken pictures or gotten receipts or whatever, but then that's taken them a bit of time to do, and it's kind of interfered with the exercise. Other times I haven't. So I part of what I tend to do also is rely a little bit and trust them and let them know, like, this is on the honor system kind of a thing. And I haven't had any problems. I haven't had other students, raising a ruckus about anything or anything like that. So I think my preferred way to do it is just to say, we're on the honor system here. Just be truthful and share your real experience and don't play games with this.
And when they come back to the classroom, right?
Yeah, and so then I leave. I go back to the classroom and I let them do their thing. And then they come back to the classroom, and usually they'll start sort of filtering in, a little before the time is up. And then we I ask them as they come in, right, how much profit did you make, right? And so above I gave them the $10, but then how much profit did you make? And so I write it up on the board. And then we decide, right, we look at the numbers and we say which team made the most money, had the most profit. And then I say to all the other teams in the room, give your money to that team. I'll give the money to that team. And then, they always are curious of whether I need my money back, because, I've given them, let's say there's 8 groups, right? I've given them $80. And I tell them, no, like, that's an investment I've made in you and in your learning. So you keep all the money. And then we move on, right? I don't focus too much on the money. I do that in a way because students respond to money, because I make a lot of money, and so giving some of it back to them is not a big deal to me, and it makes it real. And so then we talk about for the
maybe also they trust you more at some point. That's
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think absolutely. And so then I talked to the group that made the most money, and I asked them to share their experience, right? What did you do? How did you do it? Run me through your experience real quick. And so and this conversation becomes very different semester by semester, right? It all depends on experience. But there's a lot of conversation about how the team made a decision, right? Do they go and work as a team of 4, or do they go and work as 4 individuals? Or do they pair up? Right, so there's all different ways that these teams have done this, and do they split up? Do they use the $10 I gave them, or do they pocket the $10 I gave them, and try to figure out, how do I create value out of nothing? Right. A lot of times, what kids will do is, if it's close to campus, especially if it's the fall semester, if it's an August type class, they'll go buy bottled water with the $10, and they'll try to sell the bottle of water to students on campus. That's a very common thing. Or they'll buy suckers or candy bars or something, and they'll try to sell that to the students on campus. So there's a lot of that goes on. One group that was very successful one year, there was a construction project going on right near campus, and so there was guys building a high-rise hotel kind of thing. And so this group went and bought bottles of water, and instead of selling them to the students, they went and sold them to the construction guys, because they figured, right, the construction guys would be thirstier than the students, and they would have more money to spend than the students would have to spend, right? And so they, again, we learned this process of here's different customer types, right? Customers could be students, or customers could be construction workers, in which customer is going to value this resource more, right? And so they go through this thinking process, and they don't identify it as those kind of things necessarily, but as they're explaining their decision-making process, I can now highlight that we're identifying different customers, we're attributing different value to those customers based on what our assumptions of what they value and the assumptions of the resources they have, and this kind of thing. And so it really just becomes a conversation of, there's all these elements of entrepreneurship that come into play. How do you work in a team? How do you identify potential customers? How do you interview customers, right? Do they go and they talk to people to understand what they want, or do they just go and try and sell, right? So there's this conflict of sort of customer development versus selling. And this is all in a very short time period, right? So they don't have a lot of time to figure this out. And in most of my classes, they have no exposure or experience to this before this whatsoever. So this is all brand new to them. This is not like a capstone course, right, where they've had other entrepreneurship courses before. This is more of an intro to entrepreneurship kind of course. And then there's conversations about, like I mentioned before, about the sort of being a steward of somebody else's money, right, where I talk to them about, did you guys have any conversations about the fact that I gave you the money, and what you were going to do with that money, and if you needed to pay that money back, and if things were different because it was my money versus your money, that kind of a thing. And we have a conversation about that where, if you're taking investments from somebody for something, do you have to maybe think about it a little differently than if it's, your money from your savings account or your credit card or something. So, I mean, there's all these really, really rich layers that can come into this conversation about just from this one little exercise, right? And it's fun for the students because it's real, because they can make money, because they're getting to practice these skills. But again, I don't set it up for them ahead of time, right? I don't tell them we're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to learn about these skills. I just say, show up, here's some cash, go make money. That's it. And so the what's that?
So they can also benefit from their creativity resources to create something in so small amount of time.
Yeah, and and again, I don't give them any instructions, so I don't tell them you can do this or you can't do this. The only boundaries I put on it are, it has to be legal, and you got to be back in the room in 30 minutes, let's say, because I teach it's usually a 75-minute class, so I give them like 30 minutes to do this, so we have enough time to debrief, right? And I mean, they can use resources they have. I mean, they can do whatever, right? And so, and they can sell things to individuals, or they could go do stuff for companies. So one group, one time, it was 4 guys, and they were, they were pretty stocky, like pretty healthy, big guys. And so they figured out that one of the resources they had was their physical strength, that they could help people move stuff or do things like that. So they started going to businesses, asking if the business needed any work done, quick work, moving stuff or cleaning or whatever, that they'd pay them for. And they found one business that was moving stuff in and out of storage, happened to be at that moment, and they were willing to pay them. There was 4 of them, and they were willing to pay them $15 each to help them for a half an hour, right? And so they got $60, and they didn't spend my 10, so they made $60 profit in half hour. And so that's another case where they kind of decided, to look at themselves and figure out what resources do we have as a group that we can then go sell, and who would most be in most need of those resources, right? And I mean, it's a brilliant way, I think, for them to figure out that way of thinking, right? Of observing their environment, understanding who they are and what they have at their disposal, and how to leverage what they have at their disposal to create value for somebody else, so that those people will give them some resources.
Yeah,
and it all happens with zero setup, zero coaching. It just happens naturally, right? And then we come back, and then the rest of the semester, I can point back to that exercise, and I can keep saying, remember when you did this? Remember when this group did that thing, or whatever? And it's a very real way for them to stay grounded in those kind of principles, because pretty much anything else I want to do or talk about the rest of the semester, it happened to some group in some way during that exercise. So I can just point back to it throughout the entire semester. And they have a lot of fun. It's stressful for a lot of them. Certainly the ones who like kind of structure and order, they don't like it. They're not comfortable with it initially. And it's stressful because there's a time component, but they enjoy it. The feedback I've gotten on it is they enjoy it because it's competition. They like the competition part. They like that it's real. In terms of the money, they see the money as the real factor. And they like that I've gotten most students give me the feedback that they, after understanding the experience and debriefing the experience, they like the fact that there were no instructions, that they were just kind of thrown into it. They're not as comfortable with it when it happens, but after kind of going through it and me talking them through it and debriefing it, then they understand the value, and they say that they appreciate that part of it.
And do you grade students on this exercise or not?
No, I don't grade them on it. I haven't. I've had other people talk to me about that, and you could grade them on who makes the most money or anything, or you could have them write up a one-page kind of debrief, report of what they did or something like that. There's different ways that somebody could grade them on this, but for me, that's not the point. The point is to have an experience, and so I don't grade them on it.
And now switching back to the teacher perspective, according to you, Doan, what should an instructor be aware of when adopting this method? Is there something that you think is important to know, to deal with?
Yeah. So one thing, sort of logistically speaking, I guess, or legally speaking, is understand if there are policies in place, because what I do is I give my students money, cash, and they get to keep it. So there may or may not be policies or restrictions in place at somebody's university that make that problematic. So, people should always understand the restrictions around that kind of thing at their school. But other than that, it really is you have to be very comfortable with that debrief period and not knowing where it's going to go. And you may have some students that are very upset, and you may have some students that are super excited, and you may have some students that are very confused, that don't know what the hell's going on. So it could be all over the board, right? And they could be very familiar with entrepreneurship type topics, or they could be completely unfamiliar with them based on their experiences. And so it really is sort of herding cats type thing in that debrief, trying to get them to understand, here are the things. And so it could be of having a list, right, where I have a list of these are hopefully the topics that we're going to touch on in the debrief, and I can kind of steer the conversation a little bit about observation, about choosing customers, B2B versus B2C kind of a conversation, right? Do you go after the individuals or do you go after the businesses? And what are the pluses and minuses to both of those customer approaches, right? Interviewing customers, self-assessment of skills and resources that are available. So I may have a list going in of things I hope we touch on, and then I can kind of steer the conversation accordingly. But from the professor standpoint, it really is, it's being comfortable with that ambiguity as well, right? Where you don't know what's going to happen when those kids come back into the room, and you got to be willing to deal with whatever may happen, right? And one of the things is that when you're in the location, the students are really going to want to like hammer you with questions, and they're not going to want to let you leave. And I mean, I literally turn my back and walk away while they were trying to ask me questions. And I tell them all, I'm not answering any questions. And they keep, well, but Professor Winkel, and I just walk away, right? So you have to be comfortable doing that, because the whole point is to not give them any information. And so that sometimes is the hardest part, because we want to, we want to support them and we want them to succeed. But in this case, I think part of the purpose is to not let them have any of that information.
Once more, experience is the best teacher, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's like first day on the job, right? Where, hey, there you go do this thing, and maybe you get a little bit of background, but you're kind of hitting the ground running in most cases. And so, that's what this is about. And again, there's because there's money involved, they really dive into it. I think if I take that out of the equation, they're not really as engaged in the activity.
Yeah. And now a question that we used to ask to our professors, so the same for you. What is your recurring teaching entrepreneurship nightmare you have, and what are you trying to do to avoid this nightmare now?
So I'm sorry, it was a little choppy right there. So ask me again.
Yeah. What is your recurring teaching entrepreneurship nightmare you have?
The nightmare I have. So the nightmare I have is that I fall into a routine of lecturing, of just talking with them, and that I lose my ability or my passion to kind of create experiences that they can go through instead of just talking to them about things. So that's what keeps me up at night, is trying to keep things very active and very experiential. Yeah.
So and what are you trying to do to avoid this part? I guess as part of converting to much more mentoring, or is this, as you said?
Yeah. So what I do is this, right? This TeachingEntrepreneurship.org and partnering up with Justin and my position with USASB and all the professional work I do is, one, to share my thoughts and everything with other people, but also to engage with the community, to continue to acquire exercises and just build community, so that if I'm ever lacking or if I'm ever struggling, there's lots and lots of people in a community I can reach out to, to say, help me get back on my feet, or give me something for this particular topic or whatever. So it really is building sense of community and having that community around me that really helps. And one way I choose to do that is to give first, right? So I give and give and give, and then sort of will eventually ask people for things to help me out as well. Right?
Yeah. And so how can our friends in our community find out more about the work that you're doing, and how can they connect with you if they want to?
Sure. So there's always the social media, right? And the LinkedIn or my email is DWINKEL jcu.edu. I teach at John Carroll University, so you can find more information about me on their website. Through TeachingEntrepreneurship.org, we have a lot of resources out there that we're trying to build this community of people who are into teaching experientially, all of that. And also through USASB. So usasbe.org is a great organization of entrepreneurship educators that are interested in bold scholarship teaching and practice all around entrepreneurship education.
Awesome. So Doan, thank you indeed for your time and sharing this inspirational exercise too once more. And thanks for watching or listening. If you enjoyed the interview and you want to download the free lesson plan and receive the latest updates once more, I suggest you to subscribe to our newsletter at TeachingEntrepreneurship.org. Then thanks again for your continuous contribution to the community.
Thank you. You as well, Federico. It's good to see you.
Bye.